Joining us to give a considered response from the Secondary School Principals Association of New Zealand is Vaughan Couillault, and he's also the principal of Papatoetoe High School in Auckland. He joins us now. Vaughan, welcome to the show. Lovely to have you on. Thank you very much for giving up some of your school holidays, Vaughan.
Oh, look, it's a period of work uninterrupted by classes more than a school holiday for a dude like me. But
is it only school principals? I've just driven past my local school, and there were no cars in the car park.
No, there's this wonderful thing called a laptop and indeed a cell phone that I'm using at the moment, which means you can be a little bit more remote.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yes. Vaughan, first of all, I watched last night, as I said to you, Kate Gainsford from the Secondary Principals Council. Who are they? Are they different than you?
Yeah, so the Secondary Principals Council is the principals arm of the PPTA.
Right.
Which is the teacher union, whereas SPANZ is predominantly a professional organisation as opposed to primarily a union. We're the only organisation that is supporting the work of secondary principals only in New Zealand. Yep.
Right. So you've got your membership's everybody, is that right, who's the secondary school principals in New Zealand?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So if you run a secondary school in New Zealand, you can join our organisation if you wish.
Well, that's a good question. How many principals don't?
Good. Not many. So in terms of an endangered species, there are about 2,700 schools in New Zealand, of which about 400 of those are secondary. And we've got a fairly decent chunk of 300 of those that are a member of SPAN.
So not all of them.
Not all of them, but it includes independent schools, it includes special character schools, all of that sort of stuff. So a fair chunk.
Yeah, I would have thought, I guess I have to pay a fee each year to join you, but I would have thought anyhow, okay. But so that you've answered that question. So what I was watching last night, Kate Gainsford, was in actual fact the the PPTA in action, yeah?
Yes, the SPC is a subset of PPTA, yep.
Okay, all right. Now, I don't know if you had the opportunity to see that news report last night, but and the essence of their argument was that the cutting of 565 jobs from the Ministry of Education is the impact of it is going to be, quote unquote, from Kate Gainsford, pretty much entirely negative. It's negative in terms of the families who are destabilised and indeed whole communities. And Rihia Sterling agreed. She said it's going to be a tumultuous time for us as principals. If you look at the bigger picture, for example, the Ministry of Education, there won't be a child in this country who's unaffected. Can I ask a question of you? Is that the view of the Secondary School Principals Association of New Zealand?
I wouldn't have thought so. So of those 500-odd jobs, you'll notice that a good 240 of those are currently vacant. So those people aren't contributing much in terms of the front line anyway. So whilst it's always sad and disappointing for anyone who loses their job because of the impact it has on them directly, their ability to pay rent, pay the mortgage, put food on the table and all that sort of stuff. From a sector perspective, we're not talking about the people who are directly in contact with schools, from what I understand. There's been briefings and stuff offered through the deputy secretaries, which will take place next week for those peak bodies, so you can see where those job losses will happen. And I don't think those briefings have taken place yet. So with all due respect to my colleagues, they may not have all of the information required to accurately make that call at this point. It may end up that they are 100% correct, but we just haven't got that information yet.
No, I was just going to say, it was fairly extreme rhetoric, as you would have just heard, the suggestion that somehow every child's education in this country is going to be disadvantaged by what happened earlier this week. The Ministry of Education grew like topsy between 2016 and 2023. I had Professor Grimes on from Victoria University yesterday saying it was that, and they were bad hires too, he said, across the sector. Did you see, and I mean as a school principal, so you're at the coalface, did you see an improvement in outcome from the Ministry of Education over the last 5 or 6 years as a consequence of having those additional staff members?
No. So what my experience has been is that there are some, in any part of the public service, there are some wonderful people trying to do the very best work for people. And so I tend to connect with particular humans as opposed to particular roles, whether that's at a regional office or at a national office. And those people continue to do some good work and to create solutions when the time comes. I'm not aware of the total quantum that the Ministry of Education employ, but I only rely on a handful of those in terms of my day-to-day work. And so, I'm sure there's teams that do this and teams that do that. But one of the things, for example, although it's harsh, that is sort of a fair comment, is if you have a look at the recent changes that the Minister has suggested that is making with regard to the implementation of the new NCA Level 2 and Level 3, pushed that back 2 years to allow the curriculum work to happen, right? Yeah. And so that very delay in itself means that the team that were working on the NCA stuff aren't needed for a couple of years. And so there's some stuff there that might be a place where you could make some savings in terms of workforce. Devastating for the people that have been in that team, but nonetheless, if there's no work for 2 years, then there's no work for 2 years, because actually the focus of the government has shifted to curriculum development, and we'll do the assessment a bit further down the track.
Extraordinary, though, that there were 6 years in which the last government. I'm not trying to make a political point, actually. It's interesting to me. Huge number of Ministry of Education bureaucrats suddenly get new jobs. I'm assuming many of those, or maybe my assumptions are wrong, Vaughan, are ex-teachers. Are they?
Not necessarily. I had a friend of mine, for example, that worked on one particular floor, and on that entire floor, she was the only one that ever worked in a school. So,
that's frightening.
Not necessarily.
That's frightening.
Well, in some circumstances, in some situations, yes. But in order to be a good public servant, you don't necessarily have needed to have been a teacher or a doctor or whatever it may be. You need to know how to implement policy or do whatever it is that those public servants do. However, one of the cries from practitioners like myself is familiarity with the sector is pretty important if you're at the front line. And you may not need to be if you're in HR or in payroll and all that sort of thing. I get all of that because those are all included in those numbers. But the closer you are to the front line, the more experience you need to have had in the sector, in my opinion.
And the other thing, of course, that people from the outside note, Professor Grimes was one of them yesterday, said, for all the increase in public servants, and he was thinking of education in particular, there hasn't seemed to be an improvement in performance. And I think he was looking at general educational performance over the last 5 years or 6 years in terms of student achievement. And I think a lot of people from the outside, me as a parent and as a commentator, I guess, go, what happened there? Why, in your estimation, over the last decade, so let's go beyond the last 6 years, have those achievement levels declined in comparison to international studies, but also within New Zealand as well?
Yes, so firstly, if the international study, for example, that you're talking about is PISA, when you look at countries like us across the globe, they've all declined as well, which is really weird. So there's been a global decline, not just a New Zealand decline. And there's also been a disengagement with that tool. So when you look at the most recent results that have come out, all the ones with a cheeky little asterisk next to them, those countries failed to meet the required minimum engagement thresholds, meaning there wasn't enough kids that did the test to be really accurate. And so when you look at those jurisdictions, you think, okay, let's have a look at those. Australia, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, France, places like us that we want to weigh and measure ourselves against are finding it increasingly difficult to get kids to do the PISA, to do the PISA testing. And so the tool that we're using is becoming a little fragile. And on top of that, education jurisdictions across the globe are experiencing a similar decline. Not quite sure why that is, because I'm obviously focused on the front line of running a school every day. And we probably need someone with a bigger brain than me to do some research on that. But in terms of if I was clutching at it. I think some of the stuff that's recently come out from ERO has been good. In terms of what we've always said, it does indeed take a community to raise a child, and actually the schools can't do everything. Schools can't do teaching kids how to manage every aspect of the life skill stuff, as well as the health curriculum, the sexuality curriculum, the reading, writing, arithmetic. You can't. And it's important that they learn to drive a car, so schools should do that too, but it's also important that they know how to have consenting relationships. There's everything where it's easy to go, well, a whole lot of adolescents, in my case, a whole lot of adolescents are in one place at one time. Let's get them to fix it. What you end up doing is decreasing our ability to do things in any real depth, and you get some surface action.